new fears for terminal cancer-stricken King Charles and his health as his US state visit has been cut back, yet the British mainstream media continue to refuse to report on this, suggesting that the king, who unfortunately is dying, is just dealing with some type of minor cold. Now, of course, we're in the independent media space. We're not controlled by the Royal Rota or the mainstream media. And while, of course, this is a very sensitive issue, it is important that we do bring some reality to it, given the constitutional implications. And as regular viewers know, Lady Colin Campbell has been doing that here on Outspoken, and we will get the latest in just one moment. But first, I want to take you through some of Tom Sykes's new reporting on this. He says that the new pictures of King Charles, which we have been seeing over the course of the week, say what the British media can't say. Reporting, I have to say, the King's appearance today with the President of Nigeria was worrying. He did not look well, he looked very pale, and one of his hands appeared noticeably swollen. We are now in a very odd situation where the British papers are barely acknowledging that the King is seriously ill. But on the evidence of the pictures, he looked weak, tired, and exhausted, with even more than usually swollen hands. While people have talked about diplomatic sensitivities around the US trip, difficult diplomacy has really stopped a royal tour. Indeed, smoothing over difficult diplomatic situations is one of the key purposes of royal tours, so I suspect that any delay in formally announcing the trip has much more to do with Charles's health and whether he is truly capable of undertaking it. Camilla, and this is very interesting, said to be keen for him to do less and slow down, and that would make perfect sense. With the proposed dates now only about 5 weeks away, perhaps the palace is beginning to feel more confident he will be able to get there and back. But based on today's photographs, I think there is real cause for concern. Now, what happened after Tom Sykes' reporting is that the palace immediately then briefed to the Times newspaper that the trip is going ahead, but with serious limitations. The king will only be in the US for 3 days, and that will include just 1 day in Washington, D.C., where he will pack in all of his engagements, including an address to Congress and an evening banquet. Palace sources say that the shorter program had always been planned, partly to take into account the king's advanced age and his recent cancer battle. However, he is said to be keen to squeeze in as many engagements as possible. Now, Lady Colin Campbell, of course, when you're dealing with life and death situations, terminal illness, there have to be sensitivities. And you have always been very sensitive in your reporting of this. But at the same time, what we have always done here on Outspoken is deal with the realities, which is that a king's health is constitutionally significant, is historically significant. I mean, Lady C, it's Shakespearean, isn't it? You know, you have the dying king desperate to hold on to power for as long as possible, and his fit, healthy, young, modernizing son, the heir to the throne, becoming increasingly impatient. But I think what is quite shocking, Lady Colin Campbell, is that we have a compliant and cucked mainstream media that is not acknowledging what we can all see. And you've got the Times reporting that Queen Camilla actually effectively, let's just be honest about it here, wants Charles to, in all but name, sort of retire, do a Prince Philip, because she is so concerned about the toll that his public engagements are taking on his health. Now, he's not going to do that, Lady C. You know him. He's not going to do that. But can we just be honest about what's really going on here, Lady C? Because I feel like this is a situation where you've got all of government talking about this. You've got all of the courtiers talking about this. You've got Buckingham Palace talking about this. You've got Kensington Palace talking about this. But no one seems to be preparing the public for the fact that, for example, Lady C, after this trip to America, there may not be another state visit by King Charles. This is significant.
Well, that's all the more reason why he would want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
That's number one.
Totally. And I think it's great he's going, by the way. I think it's very great he's going. And I give him huge credit for putting himself, I guess, at risk health-wise in order to do this. I fully support him doing this trip. It's really important at the moment. I need you to do something for me right now. It is free. It is easy. It is simple. Just hit that subscribe button on YouTube. That's because over 50% of you watching this video haven't done that yet.
Also, Camilla has always wanted him to cut back and cut down. I mean, so there's nothing new about that. And Dan, insofar as the mainstream media's reluctance to address the issue head on, insofar as I am aware, they are obliged by law to not address health issues involving any British citizen, which would include the King, except with the specific permission of the party in question. So I think, in fairness to them, it is not a totally valid criticism to say that they are willfully avoiding the subject. I think their awareness is that he does not want the subject addressed head on. Now, you have been addressing it. Tom has been addressing it. I shy away from it as much as I possibly can, I've got to say. And you know that I know exactly what's going on and have known all along. And I keep my mouth tightly shut, as do you. But the fact of the matter is that you and Tom have more agency and more freedom to be able to stretch the boundaries than the mainstream media do. So in fairness to them, I don't think I'm sure that if they could, they would love to leap on it, in much the same way that for years they knew that Prince Philip was dying and they were not able to report on it. Now, I know this because John Wellington, who used to be the managing editor of the Mail on Sunday, was a friend of mine, and we spoke about this. And he said, well, as long as the palace don't want us to report on it, there's nothing we can do. We can't cover it. So I think we need to bear that in mind, don't you think?
Well, I mean, look, there are IPSO regulations. I mean, this is sort of the voluntary regulation of British newspapers, which do mean that health matters are indeed private if you are in the mainstream media. And look, that is something, Lady C, that I really do sign up to in almost all occasions. And certainly when it comes to King Charles's cancer battle, I mean, I haven't revealed what type of cancer he's battling or the extent of his treatment or anything like that. But I think to not acknowledge that this is terminal and that he is having to significantly change his schedule, his future plans. And I think more significantly, Lady C, that all of the machinations of royalty, everything that's going on behind the scenes, Lady C, represents a major shift in power from Buckingham Palace to Kensington Palace. And that's why, for example, when Tom Bower writes that it will actually be William, Prince William, who is able to veto any sort of reunion between King Charles and Prince Harry at the Invictus Games next year, you realise how significant that power shift is. And I think it's dishonest not to talk about that, not to cover that. Now, of course, there's a difference in terms of talking about what type of cancer Charles has, the exact details of the treatment. That, I think, goes into the absolutely, if he doesn't want to reveal that, we all respect that, and I would respect that for any individual, actually, and have done over my entire career, Lady C. There's lots of very high-profile celebrities who I know that have undergone particular types of cancer treatments. Some of those treatments have been kept completely private from the public. And likewise with, the late Queen Elizabeth II, I was very much aware of the treatment that she was undergoing before her death as well, and I never reported that. But that's different, Lady C, to talking about what this means for the future of the British royal family, because we cannot forget that the future of the British royal family at the moment is in some peril. And who is making these decisions and who is going to be making these decisions is really interesting and important. I mean, I found it fascinating this week that, last week, Lady C, that the Wall Street Journal did this deep dive on Prince Harry. I mean, again, they didn't reveal anything that we haven't revealed for months, right? Which is that he is totally miserable, at a loss in terms of what's going on, and very much suggesting that the marriage to Meghan Markle will not last long term. But they're in this piece talking about the fact that Harry will have to ask permission of the monarch when he remarries. And they're not talking about the monarch being King Charles. They just wrote as a given that it would be a King William he was having to ask permission for. So again, I think there's almost a responsibility to prepare the public too.
Well, I hear what you're saying, Dan, and I think that, you and Tom address the issue with greater liberty than the mainstream media do. And I'm not knocking either of you, nor am I knocking the mainstream media. I'm just simply trying to say that I see both sides of the question, and I see why they're doing what they're doing, and I see why you're doing what they're doing. And the fact of the matter is that because you are doing it and Tom's doing it, actually gives you a toehold in terms of reportage that they don't possess. So in fact, that should drive more traffic to both of you and increase your credibility and your knowledgeability, etc. So, but I get the sensitivities, and I think you get the sensitivities.
Oh no, I do, and that's why it's difficult, and certainly that's not why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it because personally, I think that I always come down on the public's right to know. I hate it. One of the reasons I launched Outspoken and was so determined to do this independently, Lady C, without any big backing from, billionaires or mainstream media or anything like that after my cancellation, is that I hate the fact that very often what you see is the establishment talking about an issue, the Westminster elites talking about an issue, the royal elites talking about an issue, the aristocratic elites talking about an issue, and they hide it from the public. I just don't agree with that. I never have agreed with that. And this is something that obviously has a long-running history in the British royal family, from, Wallace Simpson and Edward VIII to Peter Townsend and Princess Margaret. And the public then had no option to find out because, of course, there was no independent media, there was no social media. But Lady C, look, I did want to talk about another issue which you went public on this week, and it's a really fascinating one. You have had an approach from the mainstream media in regards to a potential reunion of some sort involving Thomas Markle and, is it King Charles, or what's going on, Lady C? What's the truth about this one?
Crazy, absolute madness. I mean, I thought it's another Meghan and Harry cock and bull piece of nonsense. I was asked about it, and I mean, it doesn't. The whole thing is so ludicrous as to be. I mean, it has to be. Ayahuasca. Oh yeah, bring me some more weed. it's crazy time and I actually wondered if it wasn't to deflect away from some of the negativity of what's happening with the Australian foray, let's put it that way, that that they that I was asked if I am helping with the negotiations or with it's crazy. None of it makes sense. That I'm acting on behalf of Thomas Markle or advising Thomas Markle, because you know the way these things are couched. You're not 100% sure exactly what they're trying to get at, but you sort of think you know. And because Meghan and Harry have come up with the bright idea that the way to solve all the problems that they have, and presumably the royal family has, is that they will organize a meeting of the fathers that will take place, presumably it would have to be in England, because Charles isn't certainly going to be traveling to the Philippines. Well, none of it makes sense, because Thomas Markle is not capable of traveling at the moment to the United Kingdom. And I actually thought this was yet another one of Meghan and Harry's stupid kites that they fly to deflect attention away from one thing by throwing a dead rat or a red herring into everybody's path in the hope that it's going to take off. And I thought, this is just ridiculous. And I thought, I'm just going to come right out with it and knock it out of the water by saying that I think it's ludicrous. But having said all of that, if she could manage to get the king and her father to agree to the publicity stunt, which I'm sure neither of them would agree to, it would certainly help her situation quite considerably. But I don't think either one of the fathers has an appetite for being used and misused and abused by Meghan the way they have hitherto been. And I think if she managed to organize it or get it as a talking point, and then of course it's Charles who scuppered it, or her father who scuppered it, and there is poor sweet Megsy baby. She was very sincere, but they've ruined her humanitarian instincts and approaches. I mean, the whole thing is cock and a bull. As far as I'm concerned. No. What do you think?
No, I totally agree with you. I think that's what it's about. And I don't think it's going to work. But of course, she's having to strategize now in her head. And obviously this links into the previous conversation we were having, Lady C. And, Thomas Markle's family have been very clear about the fact that he has been close to death numerous times over the past 5 years. So she's having to strategize in her head about the fact, oh God, like both of these fathers who we estranged with might pass away. And that's obviously horrendous, but it's more horrendous that she views that through the prism, not of what that means, but rather the PR disaster it would cause her, which is just so grim. Look, speaking of PR disasters, Lady C, it was so interesting this week, this Variety expose. And probably my favorite part of it, I mean, there was so much good stuff in this, wasn't there? But probably my favorite part in it was when she said that Variety was engaging in misogynistic tropes and trying to go into this sort of false narrative that she bosses Harry around, because of course she does no such thing. Look, we could come up with hundreds of them, right? But isn't that just such a brilliant example of that? Because Variety said she uses her hand, and even though she didn't end up touching Harry in that particular case, because they were a little bit apart from each other, it's the hand is like, you shut up now, you shut up now.
Well, this is her technique, and there's There's nothing misogynistic about calling a ball-breaking bitch a ball-breaking bitch. And in fact, if you're polite enough to just say she's a dominatrix, you should be given full marks for choice of good language. So, but of course, everything with Meghan she has to be the victim. I mean, there's no doubt that Harry is the victim of a seriously vicious, narcissistic, exploitative, manipulative dominatrix. I mean, her every movement towards him, even when she is being ostensibly loving, there's a dominating element to it. They walk into a room, her hand is on his back, and then she's pushing him in one direction, or he's coming to her and she's, pushing him away, or then it suits her, so she's yanking him closer to her. I mean, she is a control freak, and she has him by, well, let's put it this way, the short and curlies.
Yeah, indeed. Now, Lady C, we're both keeping very closely across this Daily Mail court case, which I would argue is looking pretty bad for Harry on a whole load of levels. I mean, in the past 24 hours, the Daily Mail's chief reporter, Sam Greenhall, has described as absolute bollocks, those were his words, in court, that he hacked anything, and that the story that he wrote, it was the one, which was recounted about around the campfire in Africa, was anything other than legitimate journalism from someone who I think had called up the news desk. But what was more interesting to me, Lady C, was Charlotte Griffiths, the Mail on Sunday's editor-at-large, who really did blow a hole in Harry's evidence. You'll remember, Lady C, because you were with us for the special. This is what Prince Harry had said about Charlotte Griffiths giving his evidence.
I had no idea she was a journalist. I never used the name Mr. Mischief.
Did you meet her in Ibiza?
I don't think that can be right. I don't believe I have ever been to Ibiza other than with my now wife. My social circles were not leaky. I want to make that absolutely clear. I would have to cut contact with this person.
Well, Lady C, I mean, I have to say, I think Charlotte Griffiths did a very good job giving evidence, because she was like, no, it wasn't in Ibiza. But that's like a red herring. It was in London, and basically she was with a guy called Arthur Landon, who is good friends with Harry. Harry had given her phone number. Harry had given her his phone number via Facebook in 2011, and the proof of that is that in June 2012, the day before Trooping the Colour, she needed to be let into this party, and so phoned Harry at 2:50 a.m. and then sent him 3 text messages. So, I mean, to me, Lady C, and I will be careful about this, because I guess maybe he could have made an honest mistake, but it looks very close. If Charlotte Griffiths is to be believed, it looks very close to Harry committing perjury there.
Oh, Dan, Harry, of course, has an ideal get-out-of-jail card. He's blown any mind he has with drugs and drink and very sort of unhealthy practices. So I suppose that will be his get-out-of-jail card. But the fact of the matter is that his version of the truth bears no relationship to reality. Look, for instance, in Spare, how he vividly remembered the sun shining in through the window and dappling the desk as one of the masters at Eton came and curried favour with him and said, "Oh, Your Royal Highness, oh, it's terrible. Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, has just died." Harry wasn't at Eton when his great-grandmother died. He was at Cloisters with his father. So Harry is subjected to an awful lot of false memory syndrome. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't lie as well, because it's the two things are not mutually exclusive. But we can give him the benefit of the doubt and saying he was suffering from false memory syndrome. But the fact of the matter is he could equally have been just straight up and down lying. And it's very difficult to prove which one it is, because unless you were doing a blood test at that time, and unless you actually wait until he's dead and do a post-mortem and see how many brain cells there are up here as opposed to the one that's down there, all 7.5 inches of it, I gather. We're groping in the dark. But the fact of the matter is he's not going to be charged with perjury, even if he has perjured himself, because the courts take the view that most people in civil litigation lie to advance their cause, and therefore nothing is ever done about it. Look, for instance, at Rebecca Vardy, who really set out to pervert the course of justice, and both she and her manager or agent, or the woman who threw away the phone, they couldn't have been more dishonest in the court, and the judge actually alluded to this. But did she make a recommendation that the police should investigate? No, she didn't, because most judges take the view that practically everybody involved with civil litigation is going to lie to try to win their case. So, but that doesn't alter the fact that Harry has knowingly lied, and what's rather more serious than Harry himself lying, or shall we say, to give him the benefit of the doubt, his false memory syndrome. What's even more damning is that the lawyers have been accused of perverting the course of justice, and of uttering forged documents, and of creating a false narrative which formed the basis for a lawsuit. So it's going to be very interesting to see at the end of this action how Mr. Justice Nickling finds, and whether he decides that there is enough evidence to suggest that the police should be called in to investigate David Sherborne, the other barristers, the other solicitors, and in particular Sadie Frost and Sir Simon Hughes are the two main ones in the frame, because it's their cooperation that led to certain allegations being made. Harry, I think he will be ignored. I don't think he will be ignored only because he's the king's son, but I think he will be ignored because it would make it too incendiary, and it's going to be sufficiently incendiary. And also, Harry will have a perfect set of cover excuses. Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I don't remember. I was stoned. I mean, you're going to hear an awful lot of that if he's in the dock. I don't remember. I was stoned. So Harry, I think, is pretty safe. But the rest, and I've said it all along, this case could actually end up being truly incendiary at the end of, depending on Mr. Justice Nickling's.
Oh my God.
The headline itself is extremely dramatic. Phrases like "must quit," "dying King Charles," and MSM cover-up immediately create urgency and shock. But it's important to ask, what is actually verified, and what is simply presented to grab attention? For context, King Charles is the monarch of the United Kingdom, and Queen Camilla is his wife and consort. As public figures, they are constantly under scrutiny, and even small gestures or appearances can be interpreted as signs of something larger than reality. The idea that Camilla is demanding Charles step down is unverified. There is no credible evidence that such a conversation has taken place. This is likely a narrative created by tabloids to heighten drama. The headline claims Charles is dying, but there are no confirmed reports from credible medical or official sources. Public appearances, handshakes, and speeches are often used by media to speculate about health, but they are not proof of any serious condition. Another element of the story is the suggestion that mainstream media are hiding the truth. This is a common tabloid tactic. It frames speculation as a secret, making it more enticing for viewers to click and share. Royal stories, especially those involving health and succession, spread quickly because they combine curiosity, emotion, and controversy. Phrases like dying monarch or forced to step down trigger strong reactions and encourage social media engagement. While King Charles is getting older and public appearances can be tiring, interpreting this as evidence of imminent death or forced abdication is a leap. Context, like the nature of events, schedules, and public health precautions, matters significantly. This story is mostly speculation and narrative building. Without solid evidence from official statements or credible medical sources, it's best to treat the claims as rumor rather than fact. People are naturally curious about the royal family, especially when power, health, and succession are involved. The combination of secrecy and alleged urgency makes these stories particularly shareable, even if they are unverified. It's okay to follow these stories for entertainment, but it's important to maintain critical thinking. Ask yourself, what is actually confirmed, and what is being suggested for shock value? So what do you think? Are these claims about King Charles and Queen Camilla realistic, or just tabloid sensationalism? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to stay curious, but also stay critical when it comes to viral royal headlines.